Welcome to the Better Birth podcast. I'm very excited to launch this season with the very wonderful Laura Rose Thorogood. Laura is a married lesbian mother of four donor conceived children via IVF over 12 years. She is a biological and non-biological mother. She is an LGBT plus maternity and fertility activist, educator, writer, speaker, and campaigner. She's the founder of the LGBT Mummies support group, which supports over 70,000 people worldwide through guidance, community, support groups, and events. She lectures and she trains midwives and healthcare professionals. And she has also helped with making policy and law recommendations in Parliament. She also is the chair of one of the largest maternity and neonatal voices partnerships, and she creates change, inequality and equity for marginalised minority groups. And she's also a trustee for the UK charity Fertility Network. I had to read all of that because that was right, and I would not remember.
I wouldn't remember it either.
Thank you for coming on, because it's really
me.
lovely to have you come on. And we're obviously going to be talking about the experiences of the LGBT community when it comes to maternity care. So I think let's start off like right at the beginning. Like, let's go just back to basics. And can you just explain for anybody that doesn't know, what does it mean when we talk about LGBT people?
So as a community, the letters all stand for one group within our community. So L, lesbian, B, LG, gay, B, bisexual, T, transgender, Q, queer, plus, and then that includes intersex, asexual, pansexual, lots of other different people that come under that umbrella of LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIA plus. It depends how long you use it, but anyone that sits within that umbrella.
Fantastic, thank you. And so why does it matter? Why did you need to set up your organization, and why does it matter? How do the people within this community experience maternity care differently?
When we started having our babies about 12 years ago, like, there was no one in our community having children. There was one local woman that had children. She was a bit older, but other than that, we didn't know anyone. People were out still having fun and partying, as we do as a community. And we decided to have children. We'd had our civil partnership. Then when gay marriage came into play and we had marriage equality, we changed that over to full-blown marriage. We were ready to have children. We decided on the pathway that felt right for us. But when we went down that path, our journey just felt quite isolating. People didn't have an understanding of who we were. We were having to out ourselves at every opportunity, at every appointment, explain our journey. People didn't have an understanding of what that pathway looked like. And it was really difficult. There was no one to share that lived experience with and say, what clinic did you use? How much did it cost? What do you say to midwives when they say this, or how do you navigate the system and make sure that you feel safe, but also feel included and represented? What does that look like? And we got to that point and we'd had our first child, and in the recovery room, one of the nurses came up in scrubs with a pad and a pen, and she was like, "Can I just ask?" And we thought she was going to ask about the birth, and she just bent down and went, I have a friend like you, and she's married, and she'd really like to know, because I was talking about you last night. How did you have the baby? Do you mind me asking? And she was really nervous. And we said, no, of course not. Happy to educate. So we talked through it. She scribbled loads of notes. And we were kind of like, isn't that terrible that people in our community, that light bulb moment, don't have anywhere to go to get that information or support or guidance? So it just became really frequent. It'd be in the supermarket, at the GP surgery, or at parties, or through friends, social media. And it was becoming like a weekly occurrence by the time we had our second child. So he'd just been born. I was sat there breastfeeding one night, and I said, I think we need to do something about it. And she said, what do you mean? I said, we need to set up some support, an organisation to support people like us, because it's not fair that you have to navigate this journey blind, so to speak. And so that day, 2018, we set it up. And overnight, within 6 months, we were at Parliament meeting the Prime Minister. At the Pride reception, we were doing campaigns with Stonewall. And yeah, it just blew up overnight, because there was just such a clear need for women and queer people that like us who just wanted to start a family to understand what the paths were, how you go about it, where the safe and inclusive spaces were, but also how to navigate the healthcare system, the maternity system, the neonatal system, all these different spaces as LGBTQ plus women and people. So we set it up just for that support, really. And, you know, in the last 6 years, it will be 6 years this January, badly. You know, we're helping support writing policies. We help companies write HR policies or guidances. You know, we work with the NHS to look at how they can improve the system to ensure that people like us are included. You know, it's a safe space for us to enter to birth. And we hold events, and we have 20 private support groups. People can come together and just celebrate being LGBTQ plus and say, look, we're here, this is our family, and share their journeys, and also the highs and the lows, and what does that look like, but where's the positives? If you've had a really difficult experience, or people have said things, how can you turn that around? Or for healthcare professionals or any professional, if you've said something and you've caused offence, what does that look like? How can you turn it into a positive? What could you say next time? So we're all about making that journey as positive as possible. And I can't remember the other question you said, to be fair. Maternity services.
Yeah.
It's a very heteronormative environment for LGBTQ plus people to navigate, and adding the intersectionality of being from any other marginalised minority community, so being of ethnic communities, you know, having additional needs, being disabled, having to navigate racism, ableism, cultural needs that need to be addressed within the system, that just there's no understanding, and if there are, it's just pockets of good practice or gold standard practice, is really, really hard. So you're having to deal with the barriers of being LGBTQ plus, and then all the other barriers of the boxes that you tick as well. So it can be really, really hard for people.
So I mean, obviously there's a massive need for it. You know, the fact that you within 6 months you were in Parliament, I think that just speaks volumes. What kind of policies did you help write? Like, what changes have you made over the 6 years?
Things like IVF equality, that's near to fruition. It's dragged its feet for quite a while, but making sure that not just heterosexuals but LGBTQ plus same-sex couples at the moment get free funded access to start their families. You know, if it doesn't work, of course, then you would have to go private, but the fact that it was a postcode lottery for heterosexuals and LGBTQ plus people is not fair. But the fact that there was a financial cost to us having to try before they'd even give us funding, if they gave it at all, is just discriminatory. So getting that pushed through is going to be such an achievement, and there's so many organisations that we're working with to do that. You know, fertility in the workplace, looking at that, we're in Parliament in March for that. And looking at things around additive language in maternity care, booking forms, processes, maternity booklets, all these different things, having pictures up of LGBTQ plus people to see themselves reflected back and know, actually, you're valid, you're not invisible, and this is a safe space for you to birth or to come for care. People underestimate it. It's so, so important for any community, and it's something that we feel that needs to be rolled out in most spaces, not just in healthcare. It's, you know, in the workplace, in society as a whole. We don't want to just be seen as these tokenistic characters on TV shows or adverts. We want people to see real life versions of us.
Yeah, I suspect it's once you start digging into the challenges and the discrimination, it's so widespread, obviously in maternity care, but everywhere else as well.
Yeah.
What kind of, obviously you've mentioned the kind of getting pregnant in the first place and the discrimination that occurs when you want to have IVF. Once you are pregnant, what does that look like for somebody who is within that community? What kinds of barriers do they tend to come up against?
I mean, you've probably gone through the financial barriers that you have to face of, you know, not getting access in most cases to funding. Only 4 out of 42 ICBs provide equitable access to funding for LGBTQ plus people. And I say that, but it's actually just same-sex couples. Again, we're fighting for all LGBTQ plus people to access. And then getting into the system, and, you know, from the word go, you know, the phone call, the booking appointment, having to fill out forms that aren't fit for purpose, and you have to scribble through and put other mother and sperm donor or reciprocal IVF, or if you've used a surrogate, whatever that looks like, there's no space There's no line, there's no box for you, you know, having to tick that other box, because sadly, in some cases, they don't want to put a whole list of different gender identities or sexualities or different journeys or pathways to create your family. So you're having to tick that other. No one wants to be othered and tick that other box and then have to write it out and out themselves. You know, there should be space for us, all people. So having to navigate that, and then, you know, having to out yourself at every appointment, getting asked where your husband is, or if your wife's your sister or your mum or nan, or, you know, these things happen, you know, assumptions, microaggressions happen consistently through our journeys. And being honest, you know, trying to be positive, but from the beginning of our 12 years journey, we, by baby 4, we're still being asked the same questions or having the same things said to us. So nothing's changed. And that's one of the recommendations we made in government, to the government in Parliament, to say, actually, you know, when healthcare professionals are supporting us, they need the support too. It's got to be reciprocal. You need to give them the training and the tools to have an understanding and competency in understanding LGBTQ plus people, but actually not just us, any marginalised minority community or any community that differs from that usual cis heteronormative white heterosexual community. You need to have an understanding of their needs. You know, there's so many different cultural needs. There's so many different things that people do in their history that are really important to them through birth, and that need to be respected, listened to, validated, and put through and weaved into their pregnancy journey and their birth plans. But if you don't have that understanding already, those midwives and healthcare professionals are on the back foot too. So they're not being supported to do the best and empower them in their roles. And that doesn't help with staff retention either. You know, we're hemorrhaging midwives in this country, and we're bringing in international midwives, which is great, absolutely wonderful. But we need to make sure that the midwives we get into the system, we keep and we support them and look after them too. So just having to have those conversations consistently. You know, we still experience discrimination in the maternity setting quite a lot, specifically trans and non-binary people. But, you know, from the first time when we had our daughter, great experience. No one had ever really questioned me being the non-biological mother. You know, we'd suffered a miscarriage on the 4th attempt. She was the 5th, and wasn't addressed. And that was quite difficult, but hadn't really kind of even twigged with me that someone would invalidate me as a non-biological mother until the day after she was born. And the obstetrician was checking her over and doing all the usual checks. And I'd never seen these checks being done before. So, but now, obviously, 4 children in, I know what they should look like. And she kind of said, are you mum? And I said, oh, yes, I'm a mum. And she said my wife's name. And I said, oh, no, I'm Laura. And she looked her out and she kind of looked me up and down. And I went, oh, I'm the other mum. I'm her other mum. And it kind of just went deadly silent. And she was like, and kind of this look washed over her face, and she just sneered, and she just turned around, and then she started getting really rough with the baby, and she went, I don't want her, get her out, I want the real mum. And at that point, it didn't even hit me. I went, sorry, why? And it took me by surprise, but clearly didn't take the nurse by surprise. She kind of had this, oh, here we go kind of face. And then I started bumbling over my words, and I started getting upset, and then I started crying, and I was like, but I am her mum, I am her mum. And I got really upset. And then she's really being rough with the baby, and I said, I am her mum, so I can be here. And the nurse kind of just stood there and like didn't know what to do. And then she was getting rougher and rougher with her, and I went, give me my baby now. And I just screamed, give me my baby now, give her to me. And she kind of went like that. She didn't even look at me. And she handed the baby to the nurse. The nurse gave me her and walked me out crying, and I was sobbing. And I went, how can she say something like, I am her mum? And confusion. I just never had thought at the time that someone would not see me as their other mum. But, you know, they were the conversations I wish someone had had with me. Because I would have had something smart and positive and cutting to say back. But at the time, it just absolutely broke me. And that was my first experience as a mother with a healthcare professional after she'd been born. That's going to live with me forever. And for some people, that is really triggering. And it led to a very long period of about 1.5 years of, you know, I struggled with my mental health. I coveted her. I wouldn't let anyone hold her. My mother-in-law had said, oh, I'll come and stay with you for a week or so and get you used to being new mums. And I was like, no, we don't need you. You know, I was quite blunt. I didn't want anyone, because I wanted to kind of every situation go, oh, I'm her mum. People would go, oh, whose baby is it? And I'd go, oh, she's mine too. It was embarrassing, but because of that one sentence, that level of dismissal, it just broke me. And of course we put in a complaint, and all I got told by the nurse was, in her country it's illegal, it's not illegal to be what you are. You can put in a PALS complaint if you want. I'm sorry, she's like that with everyone. There's not much I can do really. And that was what I was left with. And my wife came out of the shower and was like, oh my God, what has gone on? And I was just sobbing. And that's not the kind of experience that any mother or person should ever go through, or father. It was awful. So having that level of competency training, I think, should be mandated, in universities, undergrad, postgrad courses, any masters. It should be readdressed throughout your career as a midwife or healthcare professional, just as a refresher for all communities, because that can tackle, to a degree, discrimination, but also it will tackle the unconscious bias, the microaggressions, the assumptions that people carry, and we all do it. But for me, that was the pinnacle moment of my becoming a mother, being told that I wasn't in fact a mum. So I just, in the organisation, I wanted to talk about the really stigmatised, triggering, upsetting things that people can say to you, because if no one tells you, then you can't digest it and then understand how you're going to address it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And that's an example of a really intentional, really discriminatory behavior, which is never ever okay.
No.
But I also think that lots of healthcare professionals and birth workers probably are unintentionally saying things. And I think you're right, the training is really important, because it gives a midwife, for example, or an obstetrician or a registrar or whoever, the confidence to have those interactions, not worry about they're going to say the wrong thing, or because I think a lot of people are worried that they're going to say the wrong thing or make the wrong assumptions. So I think you definitely your assertion that we need good training in the NHS is really, really important. What other you mentioned the transgender community, and this is something which I feel very strongly about, and I'm quite vocal about on my social media, and it always triggers very, very strong opinions. So what kind of barriers and sort of less than positive interactions does the transgender community come up against when they're going through pregnancy and birth?
I think in many cases that they probably have it the worst out of our community. I'm standing here and complaining about my experience, which to me was really triggering and distressing. But there's experiences of those within the trans and non-binary community and genderqueer community that you hear and you think, does that really happen? Do people really say those things? Are people that ignorant that they would actually deny someone the right to birth and use their chosen name or address them with the right pronouns? It's not hard to be kind. It's not hard to be compassionate. If you don't understand someone's journey, no one's asking you to understand what it looks like and how it would feel to you. But just think, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to provide us care and a service. Let me do that with compassion. But we work with Tommy's, and we did a barriers to accessing maternity care project last year with them, and just some of the stories that you hear would just leave you in tears. I'd come off calls and be like, I can't believe that was someone's journey. It's just awful, and I don't see how any human being would think that would be okay. That people are being denied, you can't sit in this waiting room, this is for pregnant women, and having to stand there and out yourself, or that happens very often. Or having to explain on the phone why you sound different to the name. Because obviously, as we know, if you're trans, on the NHS digital system, you will still be recorded as female. And that will be on your notes, on your records, on your maternity booklet or passport, whatever you have. And it's really difficult for people to actually have to navigate a pregnancy if they're experiencing difficulty, gender dysphoria, or just feeling uncomfortable and want to have a positive pregnancy, to have to navigate a space and go, am I safe? Am I going to be misgendered today? Is someone going to call me a name? Is someone going to talk about me behind the desk? Is someone going to snigger in the waiting room? No one should have to go through that level of discrimination. It's just awful. And I think that compassion could go a long way. And you may not agree with someone's life, who they are, their identity, their sexuality, their family pathway, anything. but just be kind. Just let someone have a positive experience and try and maybe contemplate how difficult it might be for them.
Yeah, I feel like again, education is key. Like there's so many misconceptions and misunderstandings, particularly around transgender people, which just blows my mind. I mean, I for example, one of the things we do on my MVP account is we'll say, you said whatever, so we did this, right? Yeah. So we changed all of the signs on the toilets to be inclusive, because on the labour ward, all of the toilets had a picture of a woman, and it had a big red sign in red text saying no men allowed, these are for women only. So we changed them to make them inclusive. So I posted about that on our Instagram and said, like, that you said that the toilets were not inclusive, so we and the signs were aggressive, so we've made them inclusive. And the comments, and I don't really get very many comments on my Instagram posts on the MVP account, but the comments on this, they were just so aggressive. Literally. People just really offended because we were excluding women and we were you know, erasing women. And one comment said about how the toilets are for women and men shouldn't be using the toilets, and I think they really misunderstood the fact that the people that are using the toilets identify differently. There's just so much misunderstanding and lack of empathy, and it makes me really cross. It makes me really cross because no one's erasing anything by saying, like, when you say people, you know, I get so much I was going to swear. I can swear, can't I? It's my podcast. I get so much shit. I get so much shit from people for saying pregnant people on my social media posts. That's, are you an alien? You're a person, right? I'm not excluding anybody. I mean, I'm being inclusive.
That's the thing with additive, and we've used it for years. Additive language, it's inclusive of all people. It's giving everyone a seat at the table. It's saying anyone is welcome. So women and birthing people, women and pregnant people, mothers and birthing parents, dads and other mothers or parents. It's not hard to get your head around. If you have a problem with additive language, then you're just a discriminatory human being. You're just not very nice and you're not very kind. And when people bring up women's rights and what we fought for, absolutely, I'm a woman, I identify as a female. If you call me a birthing person, I generally wouldn't care. It wouldn't impact me. But I appreciate heterosexual women or mothers want those words included. And I get that, because why should they be erased? You know, don't erase the majority for a minority. Many of us are not even asking for that. We're just asking to be visible and to say, actually, represented. We access a service, therefore that service should represent us. And if you think, or you're inferring that a service should only represent the majority and exclude a minority, what does that say about you as a person, really?
Well, this is one of the comments that I got on my Instagram. It was like, how many people at your MVP have actually given feedback and said that the signs on the toilets weren't inclusive? And I thought, why does it matter? Does it
even
matter
if it was one
or 10 people? It doesn't matter. We don't cater for just the majority. You cater to be inclusive for everybody. So it doesn't matter how many people have given that feedback.
No. And you'd be surprised, actually, the feedback, and we had the same when we did our 15 steps, and we had loads of volunteers take part from our MMVP volunteer team, and quite a few of them, and, you know, our neonatal lady is great at calling out things like that. And she said, hold up. She said, the toilet signs. And I smirked and I was like, yeah. And she was like, they're not inclusive. And, you know, off her own back, those are her thought processes, because she's like, hey, hold up. She's a great human being. She's kind. She wants to make sure everyone feels welcome. She was like, that needs to be changed. But not to erase women. No one's going to say, oh, actually, you can't. There's lots of signs where it has a skirt, you know, that kind of heteronormative skirt. And then it has legs, and gosh knows it has legs. We all have legs, mostly. And do you know what I mean? It's just, oh my God, the things that you have to think about just to make sure everyone gets that space and that seat and feels safe. And that's the thing. Imagine being that trans or non-binary person going, can I go in that toilet? Am I going to be thrown out of that toilet? Am I going to have someone shout at me for going in that toilet? Am I going to have to out myself in front of a whole ward of people and healthcare professionals just because I need a wee?
Mm.
You know, no one should have to go through that just to release themselves.
Yeah.
It's not hard. If you've got a problem with additive language, then you've got a problem. You know, it includes everyone, and no one's erasing women's experiences, men's experiences. And do you know what the funny thing is? Men haven't got a problem with it. It's only women's rights. So I just think, again, get in front of a trans or non-binary person and listen and let them tell you what their experiences look like. And if you can still sit there and you can still say, no, I don't think you should have a right to be included in this service, then there's something seriously inhumanly wrong with you, I think, and really unkind.
And I think, you know, language is it is really, really important, because I think people may think that, you know, the choice of words and the way that we refer to people is not important. But it is hugely important. It's such a small change that a midwife or a healthcare provider can make to make a huge difference to the people they're looking after. And obviously there's huge changes that need to happen as well. But that's such a small thing, I think, that somebody can do. One of the things that I talk about when I teach my my hypnobirthing classes, and I talk about language, and I think it surprises people when I mention it, but I'm not a fan of healthcare providers calling you mum.
No, I'm not either.
And I'll explain why. It's assumptive. You know, you're assuming that person wants to be called mum or identify as mum. But also, I just think it's hugely disrespectful because it's lazy. Everyone has a name. You've got your name on the notes. Why are they not using your name?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're not comfortable at, you know, making an assumption on someone's pronouns, just use their name.
Yeah,
Like, you've got it there.
it's like common sense, isn't it? It's just really quite simple. And that's the thing, like, people go, oh, well, it doesn't really matter, it's only words, but it's not only words, you know. It just makes such a difference, and it just shows that compassion and that respect, and someone actually taking that time to think before they speak and make sure that they're not going to offend. If you're not bothered, if you're not you don't care about offending, you want to go mum, you know, I completely agree. I am a mum and I wouldn't care if you called me mum, but I just think, you know, just say Laura, you know, just say Erin. It's easier.
Yeah. And I think people also have an issue with using they. You know, all the grammar police come out and they're like, I can't say they. But I saw a really good TikTok the other day which explained this, and I was like, that everyone who complains about using they needs to watch this TikTok, because they were saying if someone crashes a car into you or they like overtake you and they cut you up, you wouldn't go, he, she just overtook me. No, you say they, because you didn't see who it was. Right? We say they all the time. If you're not sure of somebody's gender, you use the word they. So why is it such an issue to use the word they when somebody asks you to? I don't see what the issue is.
There isn't. People have not got better things to worry about, just what our community do and the spaces we navigate, and how dare we, you know.
So if anybody is listening to this and they are on that pregnancy journey and they want to find safe spaces where obviously they can come to you and your organization, so where can they find you, and is there any other like good accounts to follow, or, you know, organizations that they should be aware of?
Yeah, you can give us a follow, LGBT_Mummies, across socials, and our website. Our website is currently, the next couple of weeks, being rebuilt and rebranded in line with our socials. But, you know, there's lots of pockets of really great spaces, especially on Facebook, like support groups. We've got our 20 support groups. You know, we often have trans men or other queer people coming to us and saying, you know, we love what you do, but you're not right for us. And absolutely, we cannot fulfill the support and need for everyone. You know, we're not a charity, we're not big enough. You know, we do a lot of this in our early hours of the morning or nights, weekends, you know, lunch breaks. And it's just that sometimes people's needs sit outside of our remit. And so what we do is, the best thing we can do is say, we may not be right for you, or in fact, you're right, we aren't right for you, but I know a space that is right for you. And there's a lot of different pockets, you know, LGBTQ plus parenting groups, non-binary mama groups like we have, etc. Trans support groups, and there's lots of influencers and people and activists within our community that have got great voices. You know, Freddie McConnell, he's amazing. Like, go and follow him and speak about him. AJ Silver, they're great. Queer Birth Club, follow them for really great information. If you're a midwife, doula, birth worker, there's lots of really great people out there that are safe spaces that you can go to educate yourself. If you're heteronormative and you want to hear more about how you can be an ally, you know, we want more allies, we want more people like you, Erin, to speak up and support our community. We need them. But there's loads of different pockets, and there's lots of families popping up now. You know, that's something I wish we'd had right at the beginning before we started the organisation. I wish there were people that I could go, you look like me, or you're like my family. And that's the best thing at one of our events, first events. Our kids ran in, and my eldest, she was only tiny at the time, she came over and she was like, mummy, I've met this girl and she's got 2 mums and she's just like me and we're friends now. And I was like, oh my God, that you need it for our children as well. We want our children to see that it's usual, not normal, usual. We want to be usualized in everyday life so that they don't go to school or playgroup or wherever they go, soft play, and feel like, oh, I'm not normal, you know, I'm getting told I'm weird, and why have you got 2 mums? And they're going to get all those questions, but it's not just our journey, it's theirs too. Yeah. So creating a safe, inclusive future for them and a healthcare system that means that they're included too, because again, they're going to have to fill in forms and they're going to have to cross those things. Do you have a dad? Some people use dad, some people use other genetic parents, some people use sperm donor. You know, it's really, really personal, but having that space to write that stuff, it should happen. And that's the problem, it isn't there. So at the moment, families like ours, you're scribbling out, you're having to find spaces and push ourselves in spaces. Square peg, round hole, you know, that's just who we are. But making sure that those spaces are there, you know, I'm glad that we started the organisation to make sure that people like can come to us and say, help, where do we go? How do we start the journey? Or had a really, really rubbish time. What can I do to turn it into a positive? You know, that's so, so important.
Yeah. And I think one thing I'd like to finish up on is if somebody does have a less than positive experience, I do feel like seek out your Maternity Voices partnership. Yeah. Obviously put in a complaint to PALS. I feel like even if you don't think they're going to do anything, I still think you should put a complaint in, because it gets logged, it gets recorded. Otherwise you're completely not represented. Yeah. And then, you know, a whole community that is being discriminated against, there's no record of it. There's you know, nothing will change. But the Maternity Voices partnerships are there to represent everybody and make sure that your voice is heard. And obviously you chair one, I chair one. And I would hope that if you put a complaint in via MNVP, that would get, you know, sent on and actions. Yeah. So
yeah, and they're such a useful tool. You know, you can get involved and volunteer as a service user, and sharing that experience will change it for someone else. You know, I don't harp on about how my experience looked or our experiences looked over the years just to be narcissistic and keep talking about it. I talk about it because I wish someone had sat there and said, this could happen to you, and this is how you address it, and this is how you turn that into a positive, or how you manage that. You know, I didn't know how to manage my feelings for such a long time, and I've put them out in the wrong way, and I managed the situation in the wrong way. Had someone sat me down and told me how to do it, I would have taken their advice, and I would have had people to vent with and say, oh, have you had this? Me too, it's rubbish, isn't it? Or did you have that? Wow, that was great. You know, it's about the positives as well. It's about the time when, you know, the midwife said, how's your wife doing? How's she going through the pregnancy journey? Because I was the one pregnant. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, often as a non-bio or non-birthing mother or parent or father, it's often you're just the third or fourth wheel. You're always left out of it. And, you know, it's not always couples that have families. Sometimes you have a child and you're on your own, single by choice. Sometimes you're co-parenting, sometimes you're a polyfamily. There might be a multitude of people involved in that journey. Even the donor, he or they or she might have an involvement, you know. And that's the thing. It's just making sure that those little nuances, those questions, that choice of language, it makes a difference. It can affect people's mental health. It can affect people's journey. It can be the difference between free birthing and having a poor outcome, or birthing and having a hopefully positive experience. So words matter and experiences matter. So I just think utilise your MMVP and share those experiences, because you can change it for someone else.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today.
No
I really
problem.
hope that everyone's found this really useful and educating. Can't talk today.
Educational.
Educational. That's the word that I was looking for. I'll put all of the links to all of your social accounts and other spaces that you mentioned in the show notes, so that anybody that's listening that wanted to seek out the support from those groups can. And just thank you for all the work you do, because it's hugely important and you are having such a huge impact. And you turned a negative experience into something hugely positive for thousands of people. So yeah, you're fantastic. Thank you for giving me your
Thank
time.
you. And if any healthcare professionals do have any questions, or birth workers or anyone, and they want to educate their staff, you know, through Proud Foundations, we do all of that. So we can provide that level of education and training consultancy. So just give us a shout. Again, looking at what happens and what that can look like and turning it into a positive. That's what we want to do.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.